I thought the marriage vows meant something. When Emery held up that pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, my world cracked in half. I knew immediately it couldn't be mine. My name is Jeremiah Wallace, and I'm 35 years old. I inspect homes for a living, checking for hidden damage beneath attractive surfaces. The night she announced her miracle, my hands went numb. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms for months while she was out late with silence notifications. If you've ever been lied to in your own home, you know that hollow feeling. Your heart wants to believe, but your gut knows the truth. Those weekend barbecues with Ryan and Monica Powell, our neighbors and supposed friends, now felt like mockery. Every laugh we shared held a secret I wasn't part of. I refused to collapse under the weight of their deception. Instead, I gathered evidence and prepared to deliver the truth face to face. Betrayal makes you choose what kind of man you are. I chose the kind who ends it clean and doesn't flinch. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I opened the front door that Wednesday evening to find Emery standing in the kitchen, beaming. Her hands trembled as she held up a plastic stick with 2 pink lines. My feet felt rooted to the floor. "Look," she whispered, her voice catching. "Look, Jeremiah, we're finally pregnant." I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. We hadn't shared a bed in over 3 months. The math didn't add up. Wow, I said, the words thick in my throat. That's something. Something? Her eyebrows knitted together. "This is a miracle, Jeremiah. After all this time trying." We hadn't been trying, not for a long while. I forced my lips into what I hoped looked like a smile. "Congratulations," I managed, crossing the kitchen to hug her. Her perfume was unfamiliar, something new and expensive that stung my nostrils. "We're finally going to be a family," she said against my chest. I nodded, unable to speak. My mind raced through a calendar, counting back weeks. The hollow feeling in my stomach spread up through my chest. I'm just going to grab a glass of water," I mumbled, pulling away. In the kitchen, I filled a glass with shaking hands. 3 months. We hadn't been intimate in at least that long. The distance between us had grown into a chasm neither of us acknowledged anymore. "Are you okay?" she asked, coming up behind me. "You look pale." "Just surprised," I said. "Good surprised. I need a minute." I took my water and walked through the mudroom to the garage, shutting the door behind me. In the darkness, I sat in my truck with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Remember that first Thanksgiving at my parents', when Mom spilled cranberry sauce all over her good tablecloth? The way Emery had jumped up to help, laughing the whole time. That was the woman I married. Not this stranger with secrets in her eyes. Late nights, silenced phones. Girls' nights that stretched until dawn. Work emergencies that never seemed to happen when I was around other colleagues from her office. "We're working on things," she'd say when friends asked about us. Code for pretending nothing was wrong while sleeping in separate rooms. I sat in that garage until my water went warm, fighting the urge to start the engine and drive until I hit ocean. The next morning, Emery left early for what she called a prenatal vitamin run. The moment her car pulled away, I went to my home office and logged into our shared cell phone account. The past 6 months of statements loaded on the screen. There it was, a pattern. Every other Saturday when I had inspection jobs, dozens of texts to Ryan's number, calls that lasted hours. I pulled up our joint credit card statement next, my hands steady now that I was following a trail. Ryan's Tire and Auto appeared multiple times. Not for service. We took both cars to the dealership for maintenance. These were lunch charges, coffee. And then, my throat tightened. A hotel charge 2 towns over, dated exactly 14 weeks ago. I checked our location history. On those Saturdays, Emery's location services were disabled. Mine showed me at work sites across the county. The pieces locked together like the foundation inspections I performed, one crack revealing the pattern of many. My stomach clenched as I compared dates. The hotel stay matched perfectly with a weekend she'd claimed to be helping her mother clean out closets. I remembered calling that night, how she'd sounded breathless and distant. the receipts printed with a mechanical whir that sounded too loud in the empty house. I gathered them methodically, along with screenshots of the location data and text logs. I placed everything in a manila folder and set it on the kitchen table beside the pregnancy test she'd left on the counter. Then I waited. It was past 9 when I heard her key in the lock. I'd been sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the range hood over the stove. She startled when she saw me. "Geez, you scared me," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I didn't answer. I just watched her unpack a small pharmacy bag, arranging bottles of prenatal vitamins in a neat row. "Where were you?" I asked finally, my voice even. Emery stiffened in the doorway, her hand still on the light switch. "Prenatal vitamins run," she said, airy and annoyed. "I told you that's where I was going. Why the interrogation?" I slid the folder across the table toward her. "Then explain these Saturdays at Ryan's shop. The hotel 2 towns over. The Venmo transactions with notes like lunch, keep it quiet." She didn't move to open the folder, just stared at it like it might bite. "You went through our accounts? Seriously? Answer the question, Emery." She crossed her arms, defensive posture kicking in. I'd seen it before whenever I asked about the late nights or the silenced phone calls. Ryan's having problems with Monica. He needed someone to talk to. Her voice had that practiced smoothness, the one she used when rehearsing for client presentations. He didn't want anyone else to know. "So you met at hotels? To discuss his marriage?" Her chin lifted slightly. "Sometimes we needed privacy. If we were seen together, people would talk." "People like his wife?" I felt heat rising in my neck. "Or your husband. This is exactly why I didn't tell you." She gestured wildly. "You're paranoid. You immediately jump to the worst conclusion." I pointed to the credit card statement. "The Lakeside Inn 14 weeks ago. You told me you were at your mom's that weekend. I stopped there for coffee on my way back." "A $90 coffee that shows up as a room charge?" She ran her fingers through her hair, frustration building. "Fine. We got a room to talk privately." Monica checks his phone. He needed somewhere safe. My laugh was hollow. "And every time you helped him, you turned off your location. Because you track me like a warden." She snapped, eyes flashing. "Every time I go anywhere, you're checking that stupid app." I matched her heat. "I track my truck. You hide yourself. Big difference." "You're twisting everything." She grabbed the pregnancy test from the counter and thrust it toward me. "Does this look hidden to you? I'm carrying your child, Jeremiah. We should be celebrating, not—" She gestured at the folder. "Whatever this interrogation is." "We will celebrate," I said, my voice level. "After a paternity test." Her face froze. For a split second, something like panic flickered in her eyes before hardening into outrage. "You think I cheated on you? That this baby isn't yours?" Her voice quivered between anger and hurt. "That's cruel, Jeremiah. Even for you. What's cruel is using a baby as a bandage for whatever's broken between us," I countered. "Or worse, as a trap." "A trap?" She stepped back, hand protectively over her stomach. "Is that what you think of our child? A trap?" "I think we need clarity before we move forward," I said, holding my ground. "No more secrets, Emery. Paternity test, or I call Nadia tonight." Nadia, my attorney friend whose card was still in my wallet from when things first started feeling wrong between us. "You're threatening me with a lawyer?" Her voice rose sharply. "Over a baby we've been trying for since we got married?" "We stopped trying 2 years ago," I reminded her. "When you said you weren't ready." She stared at me, tears building. Whether they were genuine or tactical, I couldn't tell anymore. That uncertainty itself told me everything I needed to know. "I can't believe you're doing this," she whispered. Then her voice hardened. "When this test proves you wrong, I expect an apology. A big one. When the test gives us answers, we'll both know where we stand," I replied. She stormed past me toward our bedroom. Technically her bedroom now, since I'd been sleeping on the couch for months. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the family photos in the hallway. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. I glanced at my phone as it buzzed with a text. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. "We need to talk. Alone." I stared at those 6 words, feeling the ground shift beneath me. The new conflict wasn't just about Emery and me anymore. It wasn't even just about whether the baby was mine. Ryan had just put himself directly into the equation. I'd schedule that paternity test first thing tomorrow, the earliest date possible. I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Emery's muffled breathing from behind the closed bedroom door. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, waiting for medical offices to open. By 8:05 a.m., I'd found a private clinic that specialized in prenatal paternity testing. They could see us in 5 days, not as soon as I'd hoped, but better than waiting weeks. I scheduled the appointment, paid the deposit with my personal credit card, and printed the confirmation. Next, I gathered the evidence I'd collected into a manila folder. Phone records, credit card statements, the strange Venmo payments, and screenshots of Emery's location history when it had been active. Looking at it all together made my stomach clench. The pattern was so obvious once you knew to look for it. I stepped onto the back deck and dialed Nadia Kim's number. We'd met through a mutual client years ago, and she'd given me solid advice when I was drafting our postnuptial agreement. "Jeremiah," she answered on the third ring. "It's been a while. Everything okay?" "Not exactly." I kept my voice low. "Emery's pregnant." "Congratulations?" The question in her tone told me she'd already picked up on my mood. "She says it's mine, but we've barely been intimate in months. I found evidence she's been seeing someone else, our neighbor Ryan. I've scheduled a paternity test, but I wanted to talk through my options." Nadia didn't waste time with platitudes. "What evidence do you have of the affair?" I outlined the hotel charges, the discrepancies in Emery's stories, the disabled location tracking, and Ryan's cryptic text. "Document everything," she advised. "Keep conversations calm, record them if legal in your state. Don't move out of the house, that can complicate property division later." "We have a postnup," I reminded her. "It has an infidelity clause." "Good. If the paternity test confirms your suspicions, that clause becomes our leverage. Don't mention it to her yet." She paused. "And Jeremiah? No matter how angry you get, keep your words measured. Courts favor the composed." After we hung up, I added her advice to my notes and tucked everything away in my home office safe. That evening, I walked into the living room to find Emery curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up with a smile that seemed too bright, too normal, as if our confrontation had never happened. "Hey," she said, setting her phone down. "I was thinking we could order from that Thai place tonight." The casual tone nearly broke my composure. How could she act like everything was fine after what had happened? I took a deep breath, remembering Nadia's advice. Calm. Measured. "Actually," I said, matching her light tone, "I've been thinking about the baby." Her smile faltered slightly before recovering. "Oh? We should do something special. A dinner with both our families to announce it properly." I forced myself to meet her eyes. "Your parents, mine. Make it official." The tension visibly drained from her shoulders. She beamed, clearly interpreting this as my surrender. "That's perfect. We could do it at your parents' place. They have that beautiful dining room. Maybe this weekend?" "Saturday works." "I'll talk to my mom." I smiled back, the muscles in my face straining with the effort. "You could even pick out a cake." "I'd love that." She reached for my hand, and I let her take it, feeling strangely detached from my own body. "I know things have been tense, but this baby is going to bring us closer again. I just know it." I nodded, unable to trust my voice with a response. After she went to bed, I sent a text to Ryan. "We need to talk man to man. Dinner at my parents' Saturday. Bring Monica too. She should hear this." His response came quickly. "Sure. Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Next, I called Monica directly, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. "Jeremiah?" She sounded surprised. "Is everything all right?" "There's something important you need to know about Ryan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Don't say anything to him yet, but I need you to come to dinner at my parents' house on Saturday. You'll understand why when you're there." A long pause followed. "This sounds serious." "It is." "I'll be there," she finally said, concern evident in her voice. After hanging up, I went to the calendar hanging in our kitchen. I circled the date of the paternity test in red ink, then Saturday's dinner just below it. This is where the truth begins, I whispered to the empty kitchen, the words feeling like both a promise and a threat. The clinic waiting room was all beige walls and faded magazines. I sat with my hands folded, watching the minute hand tick around the wall clock while Emery scrolled through her phone beside me. "This is ridiculous," she muttered for the third time. "I can't believe you're putting me through this." I kept my eyes on the clock. "It's just a test. It's an insult." She crossed her legs, tapping her foot against the air. "I'm your wife." The technician called Emery's name before I could respond. Thank God. We followed the woman in scrubs down a narrow hallway. Emery kept her shoulders stiff, chin up like she was walking to receive an award instead of a paternity test. The technician explained the procedure: a simple blood draw from Emery, a cheek swab from me. "The non-invasive prenatal paternity test can detect fetal DNA in the mother's bloodstream," she explained, prepping Emery's arm with an alcohol swab. "It's accurate as early as 8 weeks." "And the results?" I asked. 5 to 7 business days. She inserted the needle smoothly into Emery's vein. "We'll mail them to the address on file." Emery winced slightly as the vial filled with dark red. Her free hand rested protectively over her stomach. I wondered if that gesture was instinct or performance. My turn came next. The cotton swab scraping the inside of my cheek felt like sandpaper. Strange how such a small discomfort could potentially change everything. The technician labeled our samples, sealed them in separate bags. "Any questions?" I shook my head. "This was completely unnecessary," Emery said, pressing the cotton ball to her arm. "But at least now you'll see I was telling the truth." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The science would say what I couldn't. On the drive home, Emery chatted about nursery colors and name ideas. I made appropriate noises while my mind mapped out the days ahead. The waiting had begun, not just for results, but for resolution. 6 days later, I checked the mail before Emery got home from work. There it was, a thick white envelope from the clinic. My hands shook slightly as I carried it to the kitchen table. Inside was a single sheet of paper with charts, numbers, and terminology. But one line stood out in bold: probability of paternity, 0%. I exhaled deeply, feeling both vindicated and hollow. The proof I'd expected, the truth I'd already known in my gut, now stared back at me in clinical black and white. I made 3 copies immediately. One for my attorney, one for my evidence folder, one for Saturday's dinner. Each copy went into its own envelope, labeled and sealed. The original I locked in my home office safe. The front door opened as I was finishing. "Anything good in the mail?" Emery called out. "Just bills," I answered, slipping the evidence folder back into its hiding place. "How was your day?" Normal conversation, normal tone, as if my world hadn't just been confirmed broken. That evening, while Emery was in the shower, I called my parents. "Dad? Is Mom there too?" Put me on speaker. "What's wrong, son?" Tom's voice carried that steady concern I'd grown up with. "I need to ask a favor. Can you host a dinner Saturday night? Emery thinks it's to celebrate the pregnancy, but..." I lowered my voice. "I got the test results today, it's not mine." The silence stretched only a moment before my mother spoke. "Oh, Jeremiah. I need to handle this my way," I said firmly, with everyone there at once. "Everyone?" Dad asked. "Emery's parents, Ryan and Monica from down the street." I swallowed hard. Ryan's the father. Another silence, heavier this time. "Your table seats 8, I continued. "I'll bring the food, just don't say anything to Emery." "Are you sure this is how you want to do it?" Mom asked gently. "I'm sure. No more lies, no more secrets. Just the truth, all at once." After hanging up, I texted Ray and Denise, confirming they'd attend the celebration dinner. Then I called the caterer, placing an order for 8. Emery spent Friday evening baking a cake, vanilla with buttercream frosting. She wrote "Baby Wallace" across the top in delicate blue letters. I watched her work, wondering if she'd chosen blue because she knew it would be a boy. Ryan's boy. "This is going to be so special," she said, not looking up from her piping. "Everyone together, celebrating our miracle." I nodded, throat tight. Everyone will definitely remember this dinner. Saturday evening arrived. I helped my father arrange the dining room, setting out the good china while Mom fussed with flowers. "You holding up okay?" Dad asked quietly. "I'm doing what needs to be done," I answered. One by one, the chairs filled. Emery's parents arrived first, Ray's handshake firm as he congratulated me. Monica and Ryan came next, tension visible between them. Ryan couldn't quite meet my eyes. Emery swept in last, carrying her cake with pride, camera ready for photos. "Our baby's first celebration," she announced. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the envelope inside as I pulled out my mother's chair. 8 chairs around the table. 8 lives about to change. Tonight, I whispered to myself as I took my seat, everyone learns the truth. The doorbell chimed at precisely 6 o'clock. My parents' house always did that to people, made them punctual, respectful. I stood back as Mom opened the door to Ray and Denise. "Welcome, come in," Mom said warmly, though I caught the slight tension around her eyes. She knew what was coming. Emery brushed past me, hurrying to greet her parents with a hug. "Daddy! Mom!" "I'm so glad you could make it." She'd dressed carefully, wearing a loose-fitting top that emphasized her still flat stomach when she placed her hand there. Ray patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart." Denise already had her phone out. "Let me get a picture of you with that beautiful cake." Emery beamed, positioning herself behind the cake she'd placed on the sideboard. Baby Wallace gleamed in blue icing, each letter perfect. I watched her pose, smile, and laugh as if this were the happiest moment of her life. Maybe she'd convinced herself it was. The doorbell rang again. Mom opened it to reveal Ryan and Monica standing on the porch. The tension between them was palpable. They stood with a careful few inches between their shoulders. "Thanks for having us," Monica said, handing my mother a bottle of wine. Her eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the question there. She knew something was wrong, but not what. Ryan stepped inside, his smile too tight. "Hey, man," he said to me with a half-hearted clap on the shoulder. "Big night, huh?" "Bigger than you know," I replied quietly. Dad emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of roast beef. "Let's all sit down while it's hot." We settled around the dining table, the same maple surface where I'd celebrated holidays, birthdays, my college acceptance. Now it would witness something else entirely. I took my seat at one end, opposite my father. Emery sat to my right, practically vibrating with excitement. Ryan and Monica sat across from each other, their eyes rarely meeting. Mom brought in the last of the side dishes, her famous garlic mashed potatoes that normally would have made my mouth water. Tonight I barely tasted the food. "The house looks lovely, Margot," Denise commented, filling the silence. "Have you redecorated since we were here for the wedding shower?" "Just some new curtains in the living room," Mom replied. Conversation drifted between polite topics, the weather, Ray's golf game, an upcoming church fundraiser. I watched Ryan push food around his plate, his fork scraping softly against the china. Monica kept her composure, though I noticed she drank more wine than usual. Emery chatted animatedly about the doctor's appointment she'd scheduled for next week. "They say we might hear the heartbeat already," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. I let her touch me but didn't squeeze back. The clinking of silverware gradually slowed. A natural lull in conversation descended, the kind that happens when a meal winds down. I felt 6 pairs of eyes shift toward me, expecting some kind of toast, perhaps. I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Emery wanted a celebration, and I wanted clarity. Tonight we're going to have both. Confusion rippled around the table. Denise frowned slightly. "Clarity? What do you mean, Jeremiah?" I reached inside my jacket pocket and removed the manila envelope. The sound of it sliding onto the center of the table seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "This is the paternity test Emery and I took last week," I said evenly. "Probability of paternity, 0%. The words hung in the air for a moment before the reactions came like a wave breaking on rocks. Emery's smile froze, then crumpled. She stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. "You told me this was a celebration," she whispered. "It is," I replied, meeting her gaze. "A celebration of truth. Everyone at this table deserves it." Ryan's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might pass out. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Monica's fork clattered against her plate as it slipped from her fingers. Her eyes darted from me to Ryan, then to Emery, connecting dots I'd already mapped out. Ray straightened in his chair, his expression darkening as he turned to Emery. "What is this?" Denise reached for the envelope, her hand trembling slightly. I looked directly at Ryan. "You wanted to talk man to man. Here it is. You're the father. Time to put your name where you put your weekends." Silence fell over the table like a heavy blanket. I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking each excruciating second. The sound of my mother's breathing, the subtle creak of Ray shifting in his chair. Every noise amplified in that horrible quiet. Emery's face transformed before my eyes. The mask of celebration crumpled, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. Her lips parted, closed, then parted again, searching for words that wouldn't come. Tears welled in her eyes. Not the gentle kind that come with joy, but the panicked ones that arrive when your world collapses. Ryan sat frozen, a statue carved from guilt. His fingers still gripped the table edge, and I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. The color had drained from his face so completely that the stubble on his jaw stood out in stark relief. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Monica's expression was something else entirely. I'd known her for years, seen her laugh at barbecues and console Emery through rough patches. I'd never seen her like this. The shock in her eyes hardened into something glacial. Her breathing quickened, her shoulders rose, and I watched rage build in her like a gathering storm. "You can't be serious," Emery finally managed, her voice thin and reedy. "Jeremiah, how could you do this? Here. Now?" Her hand pressed against her stomach protectively. This is cruel." "No, Emery," I said, keeping my voice level. "What's cruel is trying to trap me with a lie. What's cruel is using an innocent child as a bandage for a broken marriage." The words tasted bitter but necessary. "What's cruel is making me believe I was going to be a father when all along you knew." Monica's gaze snapped from me to Ryan. "You lied to me," she said, each word like an icicle. "All those Saturdays at the shop, all those late nights." Her voice trembled not with sorrow but with rage. "You sat across from me at dinner, in our home, and you lied to my face." Ryan reached toward her. "Monica, She jerked away from his touch. "Don't." My parents exchanged a glance, wordlessly deciding to stay. This wasn't their fight, but they understood what family meant in moments like these, being witnesses to hard truths. I turned to Ryan. "This is the man-to-man talk you wanted. Here it is. You're the father of Emery's baby. It's time to step up, to be honest about what you've done." Ray stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Emery," he said, his voice strained with disbelief. "Tell me this isn't true." Emery didn't look at her father. Her eyes remained fixed on me, pleading. "We can work through this," she whispered, reaching for my hand across the table. "Jeremiah, please. I made a mistake. We can raise the baby together. No one has to know." I pulled my hand back. "Everyone already knows, Emery. That's why we're here." "You don't understand," she insisted, her voice rising. I was confused, lonely. Ryan was just there. It didn't mean anything. Monica laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. It meant something to me. She turned her attention fully to Ryan now. It meant something to our marriage vows. Denise had been staring at the envelope, not touching it. "There must be some mistake," she said weakly. "Tests can be wrong." I shook my head. "Not this one." The tension in the room was unbearable. My mother quietly rose and began clearing plates, giving her hands something to do. Dad stayed seated, his presence steady as always. Ryan finally found his voice. "Listen, we didn't plan for this to what?" Monica cut in. "To get caught? To destroy 2 marriages? To bring a child into this mess?" Her eyes glistened, but she refused to let tears fall. Instead, she leaned forward, staring directly at her husband. "Is it true, Ryan?" Ryan's mouth opened and closed, fish-like. He glanced at Emery, then back to his wife. Is it true? Monica repeated, each word like a hammer striking metal. The table went still, all of us suspended in that moment, waiting for Ryan's answer. It's mine, Ryan finally said, his voice cracking like thin ice. The baby is mine. Monica's eyes narrowed and I watched something shift behind them, shock crystallizing into pure, unfiltered rage. Her fingers curled into fists on the tablecloth, knuckles whitening. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at him, letting the admission hang in the air between them. Ryan! Emery gasped his name like it was a lifeline she was trying to grab. You don't have to. Enough, I cut in, my voice steadier than I felt. This was the moment I'd prepared for, the confrontation I'd rehearsed in my mind 100 times. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the thick manila folder I'd assembled. I think it's time everyone sees exactly what's been going on. I slid the packet across the table where everyone could see it. Photos from the hotel parking lot, time-stamped receipts, calendar entries with circled dates, credit card statements, phone records, the paternity test results on top. Saturday afternoons at Ryan's Tire and Auto when the shop was closed, I said, tapping one receipt. Hotel charges 2 towns over. Venmo payments with notes like lunch, keep it quiet. I looked at Monica. I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but I thought you deserved the truth. Ray reached for the folder with a trembling hand, flipping through pages as Denise leaned in beside him. The color drained from their faces page by page. My parents sat quietly at the end of the table, Dad's jaw set firmly, Mom nodding almost imperceptibly. They'd raised me to value honesty above comfort, and in that moment, I felt their silent approval like a hand on my shoulder. How long? Monica asked Ryan, her voice flat. Ryan stared at the table. 8 months. Monica closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were clear and cold. I'll be calling my lawyer tomorrow. I'll be filing for divorce first thing in the morning, I announced, looking directly at Emery. Under the adultery clause in our postnuptial agreement, you'll need to vacate the house within 10 days. I turned slightly toward Ray and Denise. I'm sorry it's come to this, but I think you understand why. You can't just throw everything away, Emery said, tears streaming down her face now. Her hand reached across the table toward mine, but I kept my distance. We can work through this. We can co-parent. Stay married for appearances. People don't need to know. No, I said firmly. The word hung in the air, simple and final. I will not live a lie. I will not pretend to be the father of a child that isn't mine, and I will not stay in a marriage built on deception. But the baby, she started. The baby deserves better than a foundation of lies, I cut in. I will not be listed on the birth certificate. That spot belongs to the actual father. I looked pointedly at Ryan, who couldn't meet my eyes. Margot cleared her throat gently. I think we all need some time to process this, she said, her quiet voice somehow cutting through the tension. Tom nodded, folding his hands on the table. Jeremiah has always been honest. Even when it's hard, we stand by him. Emery turned desperately to her parents. Mom, Dad, please, tell them this is crazy. Tell Jeremiah he can't do this. Denise sat frozen, one hand pressed against her mouth. Ray slowly closed the folder and pushed it away from him, as if the evidence itself might burn him if he touched it too long. His face had gone from shocked to something harder, disappointment mixed with resolve. He stood up, chair legs scraping against the floor. The sound made Emery flinch. Ray looked down at his daughter, his expression unreadable. Pack a bag, Emery, he said, his voice firm and final. For 10 excruciating minutes after Ray's pronouncement, nobody moved. Then Denise stood and took Emery by the elbow, guiding her away from the table like a child. Emery's shoulders slumped into defeat. All that righteous indignation drained out of her in an instant. It was almost pitiful. I'll get her things tomorrow, Denise whispered, not meeting my eyes. Ray nodded stiffly at me. I'm sorry, Jeremiah. 3 words that carried the weight of a lifetime of disappointment. Not in me. In his daughter. Monica was already on her feet, purse clutched against her chest like armor. Ryan, I'm getting a hotel tonight. Don't follow me. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Ryan just sat there, deflated and pale. "Monica, please. Don't." She cut him off with one raised hand. "Just don't." As they filed out of my parents' dining room one by one, the space felt both emptier and lighter. The truth had landed like a bomb, but at least now the smoke was clearing. I could finally breathe. Dad pushed back his chair and put his hand on my shoulder. "You did right, son." "Thanks, Dad." My voice sounded rough even to my own ears. "Let's change those locks tonight," he said, practical as always. "I've got my tools in the truck." Within an hour, we were at my house. The summer evening had cooled and crickets chirped in the yard as Dad and I worked under the porch light. The familiar rhythm of tools and hands working together felt like therapy. Dad had taught me how to fix things since I was old enough to hold a screwdriver. Some problems just needed the right tools. "You holding up okay?" he asked as he tested the new deadbolt. "Getting there," I said. The honest answer was that I felt hollow, scraped out from the inside. But there was something clean about the emptiness, like clearing out an infected wound. Mom had packed up some leftover food for me, and I put it in the fridge while Dad finished up. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica. "Thank you for telling me to my face. I'll be okay. No drama, no hysterics, just straight gratitude." I respected that about her. She deserved better than Ryan always had. I replied simply, "You will. We both will." Dad left around midnight with a bear hug and a promise to call tomorrow. I locked both new deadbolts behind him and stood in the silence of my house. Our house. My house now. I barely slept that night, listening for sounds that never came. The next morning, hit like a hammer, my lawyer called at 8:17 a.m. "Jeremiah, it's Nadia. Emery filed for an emergency restraining order against you this morning. She's claiming you threatened her physically at the dinner." My stomach dropped. That's a complete lie. I never raised my voice, let alone my hands. "I believe you," Nadia said, her voice efficient and calm. "But the judge issued a temporary order until the hearing. You need to stay away from the house for now." "She's trying to lock me out of my own home," I said, the realization washing over me. After everything, she's still lying. "Pack a bag," Nadia advised. "Stay with family. We'll fight this tomorrow morning first thing." I ended up at my sister Kate's apartment, pacing her living room while she watched me with concerned eyes. "She's weaponizing the system," I told Kate. "Using it to punish me for exposing her." "People who lie don't suddenly start telling the truth when they're cornered," Kate said, handing me a beer I didn't want. "They just tell bigger lies." Nadia worked through the night preparing our response. By morning, she had assembled our counterattack. Ring cam footage from my parents' house showing the entire dinner, with clear audio of every word spoken. Footage from my own home security system showing me calmly packing a bag, while Emery screamed accusations from the driveway. The judge reviewed the evidence in chambers, then called us in. It took him less than 5 minutes to dismiss the order. "Mrs. Wallace," he said, not bothering to hide his disapproval. "The court takes domestic violence allegations very seriously. Using these protections frivolously undermines real victims and wastes court resources." Emery wouldn't look at me as she left the courtroom. "She's desperate," Nadia said as we walked to her car. "But she's out of ammunition now. The divorce will proceed on your terms." That evening, I returned home and locked both deadbolts behind me. The house felt different, emptier but cleaner somehow. I stood in the kitchen where Emery had waved that pregnancy test at me just weeks earlier, thinking she'd trapped me forever. "She can't touch me anymore," I whispered to the empty room. 3 months passed like a slow exhale. I stood in the courtroom as the bailiff called our case number, the divorce papers waiting on the table. Emery sat on the opposite side, 7 months pregnant now, her eyes fixed on the floor tiles. Her attorney, a slick guy in a $1,000 suit, whispered something in her ear. She nodded without looking up. The judge reviewed our settlement briefly. "Mr. Wallace retains the marital home per the post-nuptial agreement. Mrs. Wallace receives the joint savings account balance as agreed. Child support is not applicable as paternity has been legally established with another party." He looked over his glasses at us. "Are these terms acceptable to both parties?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Emery's "yes" was barely audible. I signed my name on the line, the pen scratching with finality. When I handed the document to Emery, our fingers didn't touch. She signed quickly, her handwriting shakier than I remembered. The judge stamped the papers, and just like that, it was over. Court grants dissolution of marriage. Parties are free to go. Free. Strange how a single word could feel so heavy and so light at the same time. Outside the courthouse, rain drizzled over the parking lot. I watched Emery waddle to her parents' car, one hand supporting her lower back. For a second, our eyes met across the distance. She looked away first. I didn't feel triumph or anger, just a quiet relief that the chapter was finally closed. The next Saturday morning found me on the lake with Dad, fishing poles dipping into the dawn-lit water. We didn't talk much about the divorce. There wasn't much left to say. Instead, we talked about his garden plans and the cabin roof that needed patching before winter. "You did right," he said suddenly after an hour of comfortable silence. "Standing up for yourself. Learned from the best," I replied, watching my line drift in the current. He nodded, satisfied. "Some things a man can't compromise on." I felt something loosen in my chest. A knot I hadn't realized was still there. The water lapped against the boat, and the first real rays of sunshine broke through the morning mist. I breathed deeply and thought, this is what peace feels like. Sunday dinner at Mom's house became my new ritual. She filled the table with comfort food and fussed over whether I was eating enough. My sister Kate brought her kids, who chased each other through the yard while the adults talked on the porch. There was laughter again, real laughter that didn't have to tiptoe around unspoken tensions. "You look better," Mom said, refilling my coffee cup. "More like yourself." "I feel more like myself," I admitted. Like I can breathe again. Through the small-town grapevine, I heard that Emery had moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. She told anyone who would listen that we had grown apart, a convenient story that held until the baby arrived looking exactly like Ryan's younger brother. Same cleft chin, same distinctive ears. I ran into Monica at the hardware store. She looked tired but resolute. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "One day at a time," she said. "My lawyer negotiated the custody schedule. Ryan sees the baby twice a week." Her smile had an edge. "He had to sell that boat he loved so much to cover the child support payments." "I'm sorry you got caught up in their mess," I said. She shook her head. "Don't be. I needed to know the truth. Still do." At the grocery store a week later, I turned down the cereal aisle and saw Ryan with a cart. He spotted me, started to say something, then thought better of it. I nodded once and kept walking. There was nothing left to say. Back home, I stood in my quiet living room. The house felt right again, like it had shed something foreign. I'd removed the photos of Emery and me, painted the bedroom a new color, rearranged the furniture. The space was mine now, honest and straightforward. I realized something that night as I locked my door. Love without truth is a trap, and mercy without boundaries is a leash. I didn't need to scorch the earth to get free. I just needed to plant a fence and stand my ground. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it signs, serves, and sleeps like a baby. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.